UDL, Universal Design. Whoops! Now I'm forgetting. Universal Language Design. No, Universal Learning Design. UDL.
Scoot up a little closer so the mic.
Sorry. Yes.
Welcome to ELT Not-Live, not being streamed on October 5th, 2014. I'm here with my buddy Dan.
Hello.
And he's here in person. There's no hangout box that I have to click on to see him.
No, we're just screwing with you. This is actually we're on Hangouts.
I'm actually not really here. I'm a hologram. If you haven't already noticed, it's late. And the second day of the conference, and sort of that late conference stupor has set in. But we wanted to talk a little bit about the conference experiences that we've had. So, Dan, you've been out there seeing sessions, schmoozing.
Certainly. And I've seen a lot more presentations than I have in the past. I'm usually a little bit lazy in that regard, and I just hang out and talk to people and drink a lot of coffee. This time I did the same thing, pretty much.
But I can't remember if I pressed the record button.
Yeah, well, we better check that. You know, in the olden days, you had a red light.
You know, I wish it still did. It's still up recording. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can edit it.
Please continue.
What do you use to edit anyway?
Sadly, Movie Maker.
Oh, wow.
But, you know, I may need to break out something else. Because the other issue I have with this thing is it records just one side of the stereo. So I have to extract the audio, add the other side, and remix it that way. So,
wow. Yeah, that's a lot of work. So, anyway, you know, this year I hit a lot more of the presentations. And I tried to purposely hit ones that were less tech-oriented because, you know, I already get a lot of exposure to technology talk. And so I think this kind of is my opportunity to step out of that a little bit. So I have other interests, including listening instruction, writing instruction, research, and overall instructional design. So I tried to find a few that met those needs. There were a couple of neat ones. Unfortunately, I'm terrible with names, and so I'm not going to be able to tell you anyone's name who presented.
What were some of your big takeaways? What were ones that will...
There was a really nice one for some folks from the DLI, the Defense Language Institute, and they were doing diagnostic, diagnostic teaching or diagnostic instruction. So their focus was on doing heavy diagnostic for formative assessment and putting that back into the classroom to individualize instruction for the students. And I do that as part of a listening class of mine. It's actually, there's what's his name? John Field kind of writes about, he's a listening guy, and he writes about diagnostic approach to listening instruction. And so I kind of picked up a few of the things that they were doing. They do a really more of a holistic kind of diagnostic. They'll pick up things like, you know, learning preferences and, you know, goals, and also they'll get into really fine distinctions of what the students are doing well in grammar and not, and vocabulary and not. And they put it together in this kind of learner, what would you call it, profile. And they have the luxury of teaching smaller classes, 6, 7, 8 students, so they can do that a little bit better. But it's just kind of nice to see what they were doing, and I might be able to use some of those in my own classes. And so,
Defense Language Institute?
Oh yeah, it's a government, U.S. government. DLI is huge. Yeah. They do. They're the guys who basically everyone who goes through military service who specializes in language goes to the Defense Language Institute, and they do things like Korea is, I think, a 3-year program there, and in that 3-year program you are fluent in Korean, and you're completely immersed. They do, and of course, almost every other language that the military uses, that they do that.
Speaking of listening, I was talking to Aaron Jolly was speaking earlier about he's been working on extensive listening. Is this something that you've been hearing more about?
Well, I've heard about it through Aaron. Well, it kind of started with I believe his involvement with English Central, and English Central was a really great idea, and still is. It's still out there, which is. You give people the exposure, the opportunity to be exposed to the language, and through that extensive listening and some kind of motivation. So this one was, interesting videos were the motivation. through that extensive listening, then they pick up or they're better able to deal with listening texts. Now, there are some complications here, and that is, through that kind of extensive listening, it wasn't graded. And so, pretty much for you to believe that this works, it has to be something that's comprehensible, something that's at their level, something that's not too far beyond them. And so when it comes to that approach, I think we need better materials and better curated materials, maybe, in that regard. So that would be neat. I didn't see anything this time that was focusing on that, though.
No, I didn't see any of those sessions.
There's I have in the past, though, and but most of them I think were associated with Learning Central, or English Central. What else did I see this time that was neat? Someone was presenting on, just now, I just got out of it, was universal learning design. I wish I knew these things better. Wish I remember. Hold on, I just had
UDL, right?
Yeah, UDL, Universal Design for Learning.
Sounds right.
Must be it. Yeah.
It's tough not to be able to Google in the middle of a
handout. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, normally I can time out and be like, oh, that's what it stands for. That was interesting, but basically I think it's just a new spin on individualized or differentiating instruction. She was focusing on the SMART initiative in Korea, which I can't remember what they all stand for, but essentially it's an individualized instruction and assessment with a technological bent. And so I think they're talking about the implementation of tablets and types of ubiquitous access, and so whether that be smart devices or other. And I think my big takeaway there was that you have to have many different ways to address learner needs and preferences, both in terms of accessing the material, engaging the material, and assessing their understanding, and just multiple ways of doing that so that you don't privilege certain learners over others. Right? And then the other part of that was providing materials that the learners need, and so that's that individualized portion of it. So it's based through kind of you assess the student, and then you provide them the bits that they need, whatever that may be. I thought it's a great idea, and I think it's being worked on at this point. I think it's still pretty far from implementation.
Any interesting hallway conversations? Anything else strike you about the conference?
A lot of the hallway conversations have been non-professional development related. Maybe not others so much. Let's see. I've met with a lot of people who I've known over the years, some other people who I've met online that I haven't known for years, but it seems like I have. And primarily we probably talked about the presentations we had just seen. So just extending on what I'm talking about now, I suppose. There was a nice, there was one earlier this morning, and I do remember her name, that is Kasen Rubido? I know I'm screwing up that name. She's a local here. I think she's at Sukmyung Women's University. And she had a nice presentation on, and I'm blanking right now, I just started it and I couldn't finish it. What was that? It was early in the morning, and therefore I'm having a hard time accessing. She was talking about...
If you want some time to think about it, I'll share some of my experiences.
Please do.
I spent most of the 2-day conference here in this room.
Yeah.
Or being paparazzi out there, because the first day, nothing's scheduled and stuff. So I've listened to people talk about stuff.
Yeah.
And on last week's ELT Live, it was about professional development. And one of the things I was saying is that when my first KOTESOL in '95, it was such a battery charging experience, and wow, there's so many people interested in my profession, and I feel more ready to go. And that over time, I was like, okay, I've seen that kind of session before, and it hadn't charged my batteries as much. But I have to say, sitting there or standing there and listening to the conversations here, I kind of had a little bit of that feeling, like, wow, there's a lot of people who really devote themselves to this profession, care about different aspects of it with a real passion and curiosity, and goodwill. Of really teaching is a fine way to earn a living, I think, and a fine way to spend the day, and it has that potential. Sure. And Barbara was just saying that the people who start teaching saying, "Oh, I just love kids," and that doesn't last over time.
No.
But I think what does last is touching lives in a positive way and having a good day.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of that being discussed. So overall, that was uplifting. A few things that caught my attention. Aaron was talking to Paul, who's developing an online ER resource that I think really answers a key question in ER.
X reading.
Yeah, I've become such a big believer in extensive reading. I think it works. It makes learning pleasant. But finding, for an institution to start it up and acquire the library is a hassle, finding appropriate books is a hassle, and so being able to affordably provide all that stuff digitally is a winner.
Yeah, but I was talking to Paul, and I told him my opinion of it, which is I think it's fantastic, but I don't think the market's going to have he's not going to see a real uptake in his market, and his market is university students and programs. And here, by the time students hit university, for the most part, it's expected that even in English, that their reading skills are actually quite advanced. And because you see that, just to get a halfway decent score on the Sunum, they have to have quite advanced reading skills. Now, we can talk about the different types of skills that they're missing in that regard.
But are you saying that their levels are too high for those kinds of great readers?
No, what I'm saying is that the programs themselves won't support that focus because they don't think the students need it. And they're going to dedicate resources to other things.
Yeah, they're just wrong. I mean, I teach teachers. I teach English teachers who have achieved that same level, and they just love it.
Yeah. But
just because we're right doesn't mean.
I know that because it's about money. It's about money and allocation and perceived needs, and no program out there that I'm aware of is going to spend their English funding or require their students to do so on a program to improve what they perceive as just reading skills. Now, obviously, we know that so much more comes out of this. But
and you think about what a student pays for a textbook. The average little textbook's $30 or 30,000 won.
Well, I think most English programs, I think most of them, at least the basic English classes, they'll keep it under 30. That's that bar because students revolt after that.
Right. But so this is basically $10 a semester.
Well, I don't.
Not to promote, but anyway,
I don't think he's finalized that yet.
I should move on to my next thought, if I can think of one. And if you've remembered something, please feel free to jump in. ITDI. ITDI has been something that's been on my radar for a while, and I've seen a couple of their sessions or whatever. But it really it was nice to see that conversation and get a better sense for what the motivations are and how it operates, and I think I'll be tuning into that.
Actually, I still don't know, and so I'd like to, because I see it obviously online, and you see some things in Twitter and some things on Facebook, and it looks like they're doing good workshops and some other informal kind of projects, but I don't know what's going on, and I know it's I think the goal is to provide
professional development for online. That's for a fee, but they offer a lot of scholarship kind of things.
Yeah.
And it seems to be run in a benevolent, commercial way, and provides a lot to the community.
Fees can be motivating.
Yeah. People show up when they're paying.
Yeah. That's why I'm here. Otherwise, I was so tired this morning. I got home at 2:00 in the morning. I wake up, the alarm's going off at 7:00. I'm like, I don't want to go. And I'm thinking, I paid for this. I should just go. I should go. And of course, then my wife chimes in and says, "You paid for it. You're going to go." I said, "Okay."
And another community that I had heard of, but had not really tuned into much, MFL Twitterati. MFL? Joe Dale was talking about it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's not Euro-based, but I think a lot of people who started were maybe in Europe.
I saw him tag that, but I haven't looked into it.
And it sounded like a really supportive. In fact, he was saying he asked some question and took a whole bunch of tweets and put it into a Wordle. And he said the biggest word was support.
Yeah.
And it's like really geeky stuff. It's like very call related, and he went down a list of stuff he had mentioned, apps for young learners and some other stuff. When I process his video, I'm gonna have to add pages of links.
Kind of going off of what we talked about last week about professional development, is that, and I find myself going through these cycles of where I'll be very interested in new things, and I'll get into them for a while, very deeply, but then I back off because I need time for this stuff. And so I see these cycles going, and so I left Twitter for a year, pretty much, and I didn't use it almost at all. Now I'm just getting back into it because I feel like it's time for me to start kind of picking up some new stuff again.
Yeah, like we stopped EdTech Weekly because we felt like we were tired of just getting together every week, say, okay, what's the latest wiki tool? What's the latest whiteboard tool? What's the latest this tool?
Yeah.
And there were just new and new versions of the same thing. And I think we were just a little tired of it. And that's kind of how things felt for a while, but I feel like there's a maturity to the technology now that it's more about how it gets used. Yeah. That's a bigger part of the question than just, here are our features.
But even that I can only talk about so much. I loved the Kelp chats. I really like participating in the Kelp chats. But then I just got to the point where I thought it was kind of repeating, and I was bored.
Speaking of which, enjoyed the Kelp chat, and we're going to do a little convergence with them for I think the next ELT Live on October 15th, 14th. Tuesday. They have these slow burn topics, and it's going to be on lesson planning and preparation. Like, how do we actually get ready for what we're going to do? So that'll be a slow burn conversation all day, and then at 9 o'clock...
Then culminate.
Yeah.
So, all right. Sounds good.
But I think we've talked before, Twitter chats for me, I can't do that.
Actually, I don't really like the slow burn ones, but I like the timed ones.
Yeah?
I can get into... Because I can sit down and dedicate my time to that. I can't check it all day long. I've got other things to do. I mean, I have to work. And so the slow burns, actually, I don't like as much because it takes too much of my time to
you can just tune in. But you can also catch up, at the end of the day, right?
I'll participate in that.
Okay,
one.
I appreciate it.
Special events.
Anything else?
I'm not sure.
Did you remember Cassandra's presentation?
Yeah, I really should. It's in my pocket.
It made a big impression on you.
Look at this. It's so sad because it did. And I got these things. Let's see. This is, God. And this was, Teacher Educators in 21st Century Technologies. And she was talking a little bit about how the uptake of how teachers will start utilizing technologies and what are the barriers, but even more so than that, it was kind of what are our expectations, what are our like you started off. I used to, but now it was an interesting one. What else? Some overlaps. Well, it was research intensive, which for some people would probably not be fun. But for me, that's kind of what I miss when I come to KOTESOL sometimes. And because sometimes I just want to hear something that's a little less experience-based and a little less idealized and more so actually researched in other ways.
I haven't attended a KOTESOL session all the way through in years, but I did this time. I attended Terry No's presentation. Terry had helped me with the walkabout interviewing, and I had offered to videotape her presentation, so I went. And it was research done on foreign, non-native English teachers, being the people not from the big 7 countries here in Korea. Yeah. So the Filipinos and the Indonesians who speak, or Singaporean or whomever. And kind of talked to her about that experience. She shared research results and talked about her experience, which I think is an interesting part of the Korean English teacher scene, and just, the lines between native speaker and non-native are blurrier and blurrier.
Of course.
And especially in Korea, where certain kinds of native English are preferred.
Right.
Whereas what we really, I think, should be focusing on is global communication.
Yeah, well, we have that privileging, and so for so long that North American English has been privileged, mostly due to, obviously, geopolitical and social preferences. But and then they I think it mostly started off with the preference for North American, Canadian, American dialects, and then later, around the time that everyone was ramping up for the World Cup, it was more so. Then you started seeing more Australians, New Zealand, South Africans, and so forth, and now in the last 10 years or so, start seeing more people from the Philippines teaching, and like you said, Singapore, and other of the what do they refer to those as, the expanding circles,
And finally,
inner, outer, expanding.
Okay, who is that?
I know. Is it Prabhu? Is it?
It's week 3 of my cross-cultural communication class.
Remember, forget the guy. Remember the idea.
Right. At the risk of ending on a down note, our very first conversation was with Scott Thornbury, and Mike Griffin was interviewing him, and we were talking about all the dogma and how great it can be for learning, and there was a question about practical change. How can we change the system to make it more friendly to this? He's like, I don't know. There really hasn't been much change. We keep talking about it, but there's been so little progress, which is sort of striking.
Well, we tend to go in circles. But just think about this. The norm, whether people want it to be or not, and whether it's taught in schools or not, the norm is simply to stand and deliver. That's it. That's the expectation, and it's that's how we learned, and therefore we kind of push that forward, whether we want to or not, in many ways. Until we watch videos of ourselves and get a little disgusted. And those are even that's a big thing, right? We learned. Well, it depends on when you got into teacher ed, but you could learn these more cognitive processing approaches, or these more constructivist approaches, and we oftentimes tend not to use them at all. And these are changes that were implemented 40 years ago. These are things that have been popular for many, 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 many years, and they've only been implemented lightly. And a lot of it's talked about in these conferences as these idealized classrooms, and hey, this is what I do. But realistically, if you go and kind of sneak in and watch these people's classes, they might do this sometimes, but it's not what they do all the time. And if it is, then you got to wonder. A lot of times they're being criticized by students, by administrators, by parents,
and there's so many constraints. And in one of our recent discussions, Dusty asked, his son had just completed a program in the University of Hong Kong on CLIL, including more content-based learning. The likelihood of it being used here in Korea. She's like, well, primary, we can probably do it. Secondary, as long as there's student, as long as there's the entrance exam, nothing changes.
Well, and let's talk about whether we should. Why should Koreans learn content areas in English just to improve English? It's not necessarily going to improve their content area skills.
Right.
And so why should we be privileging English in that regard?
But for language learning, I think there's a case to be made.
Certainly. It's fantastic for language learning.
But she was Angel was also making the point that engineers shouldn't have to learn English. It shouldn't be a barrier, and it's sort of becoming elitist because in order to go to the top universities, you have to do English, and the richer classes tend to have the support for that.
Yeah, the mandatory English content courses in KAIST, as an example. This is a debate. I think it's a debate. I think it's also subtle in many ways, because I'd like to debate it on the particular context and the people that it's being implemented with.
Sounds like an upcoming show.
I think maybe it should be, but unfortunately, I think it's just repackaged CBI, and we've been there before.
All right. Any upbeat to end on?
It's over.
I think that's about it. I got a 2-hour ride home. It's time to go.
All right. Well, Dan, thank you very much for...
You got longer than that.
Yes, I do, and some packing up to do. But I appreciate all the conversations you have with me online and off. It's great to do one here face-to-face. And, I'll have to watch the tape, but I think we sounded semi-coherent.
Yeah.
I'll get back to you on that.
Are my eyes open?
Yeah, I don't think I looked especially good, but, great talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you online soon.
Bye-bye. You got a lot of editing to do. Yeah.